Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Anyone have any experiences with conspiracies in their own hometown? No need to list location, but a story would be nice. Right now, there is a local chain carpet and flooring store near me, and I'm 100% sure it's a cover for money laundering. No one goes in, it's completely dead, and it's in an awful location. I tried to research the owners, but there is no name, and it says the company was founded in 1948, but there's no name associated. Like I said, it's a chain and there are other stores, so I'm considering camping out at the other locations to see if they're as dead as the one near me.
Yeah. Cloth carpet stores, mattress stores, they're not really stores. The companies that own those huge empty stores are actually real estate prospecting companies that hold huge pieces of commercial property, run something with as little overhead as possible, and then sell the property for a profit when the market is higher. It's an epidemic across the country.
Wouldn't it cost less to maintain an empty building than to pay salaries and inventory for a store that makes no sales?
Many cities don't like that their buildings are made empty by some faceless, massive corporations. It looks bad, makes the investing companies look bad, and makes it very hard to pretend there's nothing dodgy going on. Mattresses and carpets don't get old or lose value, and someone always buys them. Better hire a couple people to sell, earning at least part of their salaries, instead of heating the building and buying security for nothing. When it's time to sell, they get way better money because it's an active shop instead of empty gloom. Who knows what tax and other trickery these shops allow?
I've lived in many places in Australia, and one, about a half-hour's drive away from a new estate back when, had dozens of large fields from when folk used to farm shit out there, surrounded by creeks and forests and the like. A friend and I decided to check out a few old shacks nearby one night, decrepit things untouched for a few decades at minimum, used for sheep shearing, storing farming supplies, etc. We only had a shitty torch each, and in our exploration found a few oddities like a Coca-Cola bottle that expired before either of us were born, that had turned into a tar-like sludge, rusted cutlery that retained their edge enough to slice through the cacti surrounded the shacks, and other miscellaneous BS. Just as we were getting bored of the shacks, we walked into what we told each other was the last one. Looking around, everything was pretty similar to the others, but once we popped around the fence thing inside, we saw musky white fur laying about, mushed together with newspapers and leaves. Unsure of what it was, my friend and I took a closer inspection, and we nearly shat ourselves. It was a nest. Not for chickens, not for a dog, but something much larger. Neither of us would admit it, but we were both thoroughly spooked before entering the final shack. Once we'd identified it as a nest, we bolted so far and fast that we were over an hour's walk from home because we'd gone in the opposite direction. Once we'd managed to calm down, we started discussing what we'd seen, and it wasn't the realization that we found a nest of some monster, but that we'd heard some fucked up moaning, howling nearby. It's been a decade or two since then, but it's stuck fresh with me all these years.
All of this happened in 2015. I live in quite a small village, and it's in the middle of nowhere, so everyone knows everyone. One day, police cars started going through the village all the time. A new greenhouse opened and it was constantly patrolled by armed police with dogs. If you tried to walk near it, you'd get followed by armed police. One night I was out with my friends and two huge dudes came past us. They were both handcuffed to a metal briefcase, and they shouted, "You saw nothing," at us. Then a couple days later, my friend who lived next to the train station informed us her house was now under armed guard because a bunch of escaped criminals showed up at her house. The first man claimed he got off at the wrong stop and asked if he could come in and make a phone call. Then another man came, and then another, until there were 5. They all felt very threatened by the men, though the men didn't threaten them directly. They all left, and then an hour later they had a knock on the door from the police. The police claimed witnesses had seen some men come into their house. The police held up a picture, and asked if any of these men had been round. The men on the picture were Britain's 5 most dangerous escaped criminals. All this shit happened around the time this new weird greenhouse got put up. We also started getting crazy UFO activity. The greenhouse is still there, the armed guards are still there, but we have no idea what is going on. It's like some weird government facility.
I live in a small town near Lake City, Florida. I grew up hearing stories of the EndTimers and how I should stay away and never talk to them. Rumors about the preacher and founder forcing sex from all the to-be-wed women and having multiple wives. Those rumors are what interested me, but the truths that I found were far from the rumors. Growing up, we used to drive by the neighborhood and we'd point at their huge, nice houses and talk about conspiracies regarding the church. The armed guards outside during church service gave us too much of a fright to actually go in, but never mind our curiosity to research and discuss. Years later, I find myself back in my hometown, but don't expect much since the founder, Charles Meade, died in 2010. My friend Marcus and I went on a little adventure with a day off and a full tank of gas to visit the EndTimers and what they'd become. Driving by, the church was gated and had cameras everywhere, no trespassing signs, and an immaculate lawn, along with an enormous building that was just as big as I remembered it as a kid. We stopped at a blinking yellow light and turned left, now driving parallel to the church, and now talking of conspiracies. To our right, there was a neighborhood, all incredibly nice houses, all incredibly clean and quiet. No bikes or kid toys outside, no decoration, no indication that they were homes. No fences declaring ownership, no dogs, barely people. But a car parked outside every home was the only indication of civilization. We drove around, in awe of the homes and how incredibly nice they were. Each house had to at least be $500,000, yet nobody seemed to be enjoying the home they'd spent $500,000 on. The only children we saw were in a uniform and playing a very boring game of catch with a baseball, and stared at us and stopped playing while we drove by each time we drove by. We got stares and glares from everyone in the community. We also visited this charter school next to the church, and by next to, I mean they were so close that from driving on the school campus, I could reach the church parking lot. We drove onto campus, it's about 5 p.m., and we're just driving through the parking lot. I looked for no trespassing signs. There were none. We drove around this loop behind the school building. It appeared that there was one main building, and the rest were those trailers you could put classrooms in. I'm hoping to take a trip back and get more photos. There weren't any officers or security guards, and as we turned the loop, we saw there was an open gate and a road which was to the church. We again looked for the no trespassing sign, and seeing none, continued onto the church parking lot, which was desolate. We quickly got spooked out and left, checking out the neighborhoods one more time. After about 15 minutes, we headed back, going past the charter school, seeing the gates closed and chained, and a man standing outside the gates. I pull in and act like a confused, just-moved-in local. He walks around the back of my car, checking my license plate for a second before putting his hand on my side wing window. I asked him if the charter school was connected to the church, to which he hesitantly replied, "No, this is a charter school." We were too spooked to remember to film. Picture is of the front gate of the church where the armed guards stand. You can see a few cameras. Now I'm going to give you a brief history of the EndTimers. Basically, the founder, Charles Meade, had the church in South Dakota, which was just as cult-like there as it became down here. Basically, God spoke to Meade and told him that Lake City, Florida was where the true Christians would survive the apocalypse. Since they came to Lake City, the FBI has investigated them. Members have defected and told their tales, and the leader was painted as a god of his own. Since he died, his successor and family member, can't remember if grandson or which, spoke out against the rumors, basically just denying everything, and nobody bat an eyelash, and everyone just assumed that it was over because he was dead and etc. But I think they're still living the same way. In any case, here are some sources you can check out for yourself, including the FBI file on Meade. From the article by Sandra Smith. Yet the core of his followers are well educated, having been recruited in the mid-70s from a Bible study group at Northwestern University in Chicago. Among them are geologists, high-tech electronics technicians, and heads of companies, including one top leader who has master's degrees from Northwestern and Indiana University. Another is a graduate of the Air Force Academy. They are easily noticed on the highways and streets of Lake City. End time. Men wear their hair short and unstyled. No beards or mustaches are allowed, as Mead has preached that mustaches are signs of the homosexual spirit. Women and girls wear calf-length skirts and shoulder-length hair. They don't wear makeup, for to do so would invite demons, particularly one once referred to by Mead as the lipstick spirit. In addition to believing that Charles Mead has been called to establish God's perfect community on earth, they believe newspapers, radio, and television are instruments of the devil. Animals, even images of animals, harbor demons. Therefore, EndTimers don't have pets. A former member says that she placed masking tape over pictures of teddy bears painted on her child's crib for fear that demons would leave the teddy bears and enter her child. To say that you are tired is a sin, as God's people are to be empowered with supernatural stamina. It is a sin to cry, for if you cry, you have lost your joy. Pick-Related is one of the many expansive, lavish homes in the neighborhood, just thousands of feet down the road from the church.
I live in Orlando, and have passed by that area once or twice. My friend, who was driving, kept slowing down to look at the houses. Basically, like you say, huge, beautiful homes on a desolate landscape of grass. Completely quiet. The property they're built on was cheap. Realty, I think, labeled as farmland, so what you don't spend on land, you spend on the house.
It's a pretty common rumor that when you enter the church, you have to give all your money to the church. They redistribute wealth among the community, so that's why everyone has big houses. Also, that's the allure of it. If you do a bit of research, you find that almost all of the members have big roles in the community. Realtors, landscapers. One guy is in the Chamber of Commerce for the city. It gets creepier as you look further into it. Plus all the deaths and ex-member stories.
I would say our local conspiracy is socioeconomic. Our town is trying to weed out the lower income. Another conspiracy is that we have had a NASA center. Let your mind run with any thought because we had a lot of theories on that. To better explain, we had a Challenger Space Center, which was an educational center. Apparently there weren't too many of these, but our small-ass town had one. There were many rumors that stated that weird things went on. People found or saw some weird shit at the retention pond nearby. Rumors that it had a communication center that was in contact with aliens or other stuff. It was pretty weird because a lot of people knew about this building. People who ran it were from NASA. They closed the program pretty quick, and for the money spent on it was surprising too for its closure. One other theory, and one I tend to agree with, was that it was used to measure a kid's abilities. Since some of the educational stuff involved simulation, like I remember we were all assigned jobs based on a test we took before doing the simulation of a space trip. We were assigned jobs and they observed how well we organized and orchestrated. A parent of a friend thought it was their way to give scholarships or observe certain students to coach them into the STEM fields for adult life.
I have a couple. This first one isn't really a conspiracy, but more of a set of myths or urban legends from my childhood. B2000's kid, born in '01. Southwestern Ohio. Grew up on a really long street that ended in a cul-de-sac. Just beyond the cul-de-sac was a small valley full of really thick brush. Pick-related. We used to sled down the hill that fell into the valley but never went further. One kid said he had ventured down there once and encountered a hermit with a knife. One time, me, my sister, and some other kids tried to make an expedition into the brush. As we ventured in, we found a shopping cart and some other old shit that shouldn't have been there. This was proof enough for us that there really was an evil hermit down there, and we all got scared and left. About 250, 300 meters from the Coulee des Sacs and just beyond the valley was a really big house. We could only see the top floor of the house over the trees, and without fail, there was always a single candle in the furthest right window. The logical conclusion we came to was that the house was haunted, and that the ghost was holding the candle. The person who lived there blew their head off, was the story one of us made up. There was also a patch of woods behind my friend's house where he claimed an old house burned down. We actually found the burned pages of a Harry Potter book back there, so who knows? Now for a conspiracy. My grandpa worked as a security guard at U.S. Shoe in Cincinnati during roughly the 70s and 80s. U.S. shoe made boots for the Army, but the workers there were extremely secretive. They never elaborated to my grandpa what exactly he was guarding. He was only told some shady shit about it being top secret and need to know. I remember him mentioning plans for a stealth bomber during the story, but that might honestly be me remembering wrong. Anyway, I've tried doing research on U.S. shoes since, but information on the company is pretty scarce, which only fuels the conspiracy for me.
I don't think this one ever led to anything, but it was an in-joke with me and my friends for a few months, stuck in the parking lot at 11 p.m. because a friend's car broke down. Everything in this block closes past 9. Always. Except for tonight, there's a coffee shop inexplicably open at 11 p.m. Incredibly loud banging on drums, weird circular seating arrangement. Few lights are on. People entering and leaving the building. Sorta shrugs it off. Next day, I research. Found out this place used to be a kids spa, and the coffee shop was put in really recently. Normally closes at 7 p.m., so being open at 11 was exceptionally weird. Found some inside pics suggesting they completely changed their seating arrangements the night prior. No indication of drums or music of any kind. All the Google reviews point out the accommodations for kids and are responded to by the owners. Find out the place apparently has something to do with African orphans and Christian faith healing. Decided that weird Christian faith healing coffee shop that is a front to get money for orphans letting people in after 11 p.m. is a good enough for a police bust for me. Still kinda wonder if this was some mini elite pizza deal or something.
I grew up about 2 miles away from an old Atant TV tower that was built in the 60s. The style of it always struck me as pretty strange because I've never seen any other towers that look like it. The tower and the general area looked like PIC-related. I had been to the base of the tower a few times throughout my life but never thought much of it. When I was in high school, my grandpa told me for the first time that he actually worked on the project for when they built that back in the 60s. He was an iron worker. And that beneath the small building next to it is actually a massive, full-scale 60s fallout shelter. It was pretty strange learning this and not knowing it was there the whole time. Anyways, myself and about 5 other friends break into the place. Door was relatively sturdy, but my friend kicked it in, which was pretty impressive. At first, it just appears you're in some old garage, but you walk down a flight of stairs and suddenly you can see that the place goes down like 5 floors. The entire place is mostly pitch black, but some rooms have safety lights on. So the first thing you come upon is a massive metal door on mechanical hinges with a button next to it. When you push the button, I shit you not, loud alarms start to sound off and the door slowly opens up, straight out of a sci-fi movie. The entire facility is massive, like 6 gymnasium-sized rooms with huge generators and electrical equipment, big machines lined with various gauges and switches, etc. Cafeteria, giant rec area, various living quarter type rooms. I would say the place is easily the size of a large indoor mall. I have videos of the place, but no pics. Whole thing was creepy. Unlike other spooky places, we had no reason to believe anyone had been down there in 30+ years.
My country has had a problem with senior pensions for years. The Gov sometimes struggles to pay them in time, fully, or failed to catch some fraud that went on for years. They didn't check who was still dead or alive and who was claiming the money, so some people were claiming dead folks' money. It got so bad that they bumped up the minimum age for pensions a few years a while back. They've been implying that the problem is the increasing elder population. Not enough kids being born, lots of old people living much longer than before, etc. They were doing pretty good about quarantine stuff up until a month or so, when they started opening stuff, and just recently they have started closing things again. We went from 5, 20 cases per day to 100, 200, and they just let it happen. A lot of old people are getting sick, then dying. It feels intentional at this point to let the virus wreak havoc in the elderly population to ease up the pension fund a little, because the state pays them out of its own pocket.
Highlands of Scotland here. I live an hour or so drive from Boleskine House. Aleister Crowley owned it for a while. Locals wouldn't walk past it. It's on the south shore of Loch Ness. Burned down a while ago, though. Haven't been down to see it since. I remember some years back, a friend of mine and his wife, who he'd just married, had a Boleskine experience and would tell the story to people for years afterwards. I can't remember the full details of the story, but basically, they were going along the B-852, I think, one evening. They had their windows wound halfways down. As they passed the area of the Boleskine house, they both felt a sensation that somebody was sitting behind them. My friend then felt the sensation of someone kicking his seat from the back, and he then felt a sharp pain in his chest. I think the next part of the story was that he was so startled by it that he temporarily lost control of the steering, and they screeched around in a circle before he got his wits back and managed to come to a sharp halt. He then managed to gain some composure enough to park to the side of the road. It's a miracle they didn't have a bad crash. Anyway, the wife said she heard a giggle after they had parked. Only she said she heard it, while he said he didn't hear anything. He just said he kept having the pain in his chest, and they could both still be the presence behind them in that car. They started praying out loud as they sped off. Once they were completely away from the area of the Boleskine property, they felt the presence leave the car and his chest pain went away. Needless to say, they rolled their windows right up. At their hotel pub that night, they told their story to the locals. Turns out the locals have said for many years to never have your windows wound down in the car while passing by that property. My friend and his wife insisted they didn't know anything at all about the Boleskine house or the lore attached to it before their experience, so if that could be believed, I think their experience was a very real one. There might have been other details, but I can't remember more than that. Haven't spoken to either one for many years now.
I live in Huntsville, Alabama. There's a playground next to the cemetery here that is supposedly haunted, and that ghosts of kids come to play there. It's called Dead Children's Playground. It's a pretty neat spot and kinda spooky at night, but I don't actually think it's haunted. I was also told that the people who live in the old historic houses in the neighborhood surrounding this cemetery supposedly won't open their doors after midnight for some reason. There's also a place up on the mountain called Hell's Gate, which has a ton of different rumors surrounding it. Something about a ghost car chasing you down the mountain, a bunch of stuff about rituals and people going missing, etc. I went up there, Hell's Gate, once at night to play a game of airsoft in the woods. One of my friends that was there swears he saw hooded figures skulking around in the dark, but I didn't see them myself. What we did find, though, was a dead blackbird stapled to a wooden post. I wanted to investigate, but when the leader of our group saw it, he got spooked and immediately said it was time to leave. I wish I had gotten pics.
Born and raised in a small Virginia town known for its big Christian college. Now me and everybody's mom has all kinds of dirt on the family that started it and ran it, but that's not what I'm talking about now. About a decade ago, there was a power outage that took out most of the town, and I was helping with the relief. Everything was down for about a week. So I did stuff like bringing people water and checking on the elderly and sitting up late at night at HQ to make sure anyone who needed something could get it. One night, a man comes to our station. He's desperately trying to find his daughters. As we're talking to him, it becomes clear that he thinks someone lured his girls away and he doesn't want their granddaddy to find them. The granddaddy's supposed to be a big power player in the area behind the scenes, and he'd attacked this man's wife, who was his daughter, repeatedly through her life, including after this man was engaged to her and intended to do the same to his granddaughters if he got the chance. One of the pastors from that big school came around, promised the guy they found his kids, and escorted him away. I never saw him again. I still think about it sometimes, and if it's true.
The movie Chinatown, forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown.
Forget it, Joe Bob, it's Lynchburg from the same area. I made the mistake of going to Liberty when it used to be free for locals, and weird shit went on there. Like there was a group of LARPer cultists going around butchering animals and leaving them in pentagrams and shit. Mostly frogs and mice. But one time they got a deer and left it in the tunnel between the fancy dorms and the main campus. People hated talking about it. Still pretend it didn't happen all the time from like 2011 to 2013. Maybe earlier, maybe later too.
Loganville, Georgia, reporting in. There's a few around here that are spooky. There's Jack Pittman Road, which has an old slave hanging tree that used to, around 10 years, still have the ropes hanging from the tree. The entire property burned down mostly, but that tree just got blackened. Anyways, you're supposed to drive out there at night and turn off all your lights. The longer you sit, the more eerie the situation becomes. You sometimes see things moving near the tree in the field and occasionally hear stuff moaning near the tree and burnt-down barn. There's also a graveyard in Good Hope near here that my aunt and uncle went to on a date. It seems to be storming over that cemetery more often than not. The clouds will just roll through the graveyard, making everything dark. So my aunt and uncle are out there on a date and see one of these clouds rolling in and decide to nope out of there. As they're starting the car and trying to drive, they feel like last they're stuck in mud, as the tires are just spinning. They eventually get the car to move and feel like something is scraping the trunk. When they got home, they looked at the rear end of the car, and there were 10 large scraps taken out of the paint, as if something was dragging its nails along it when they left. Scared the shit out of them, and they took pictures. Sometime later, maybe 5 years, they were talking to some friends about it and showed them the pictures. Their friends ended up going ghost white as they had the same experience and had taken pictures as well. Never been there myself for long enough to experience it, but seeing them that scared about it still bothers me.
The place where I grew up was next to this big naval air weapons testing and development base. In the late 80s and early 90s, a doctor in the area wanted to do research on our abnormally high infant mortality rate. Commander of the base shut down the research altogether. The doctor tried to appeal to be sent a letter from a higher-up in the Department of Defense that firmly punished the research. This is one of the only believable of all the conspiracy theory kooky shit people attribute to China Lake, and also one of the least ranted about by the loons online. All the human smuggling and brainwashing bullshit people mention is entirely baseless. Biggest clue is their claim that children are brought in by train, despite the fact that no trains have traveled any connecting rails in about 40 years. I lived near the rails my entire life. But the stuff they test on the ranges and have tested since World War II, the bombs everyone hears go off all the time, that could actually be something. They did work on the casing for the atom bombs dropped on Japan there after all.
I've witnessed that shit firsthand. It's real, it's rampant, it apparently cannot be stopped.
Call me a shill, whatever. I've been in the hangars that supposedly have the woodpecker cages at that base. None of that shit is there. And not like, oh, they cleaned it up that day. It was my job to deliver mail and packages to offices and tech crews in the hangars and the range stations. Most all you see is D-bag Marines being bored off their assets, pretending to work on choppers, and engineering computer tech people working buildings full of servers. There is secret stuff, but it's traditional weapons dev shit. Of course, y'all won't believe me because Le Shill or whatever wasn't tangent to my point. My point was stuff that has been legitimately shut down that isn't necessarily Illuminati. Research into why the valley has abnormally high infant mortality and even cancer rates is at least something that isn't empirically unprovable / only provable on the hallowed halls of the internet.
In all honesty, it was most likely the plane fuel remnants and other assorted military shit. Infant mortality related to leukemia, shit like that. Commander probably shut it down to avoid regulations or getting relocated to a shit base. DOD shooting the investigation down because it's more expensive to reduce the fuel fallout, etc. There are cases of the big-time dudes buggering kids, though. Hollywood, for example. And just because your base didn't have human smuggling doesn't mean it doesn't go on in other bases.
Oh, I don't doubt there is some shady shit in life, Hollywood and upper echelons. I just get that eye-roll look when I find sites online that pinpoint that base as one of the chief hubs of this elaborate scheme when it starts describing stuff that just isn't there. As for shutting down research and all that, they certainly are. Mundane explanations. End of Cold War, blah blah, and not wanting to face possible lawsuits if particulate from testing was correlated to mortality cancer rates. What seemed extreme was when the commander of the base asked for her husband's resignation from his position as a civilian contractor in response to her inquiries. Makes it shady, even if it is all sensible on the grounds of secrecy. Shortly thereafter, some studies linked such trends locally and nationwide to particulate alkali population in the air from nearby Owens Lake, since its water level had been lowered to almost complete dryness year-round by the LADWP. And while that makes sense, heavy metals are bad shit. Doesn't match the prevailing wind directions and such that would make it a primary contributor to these trends. Locals kind of just hand-wave that now, especially since the infant mortality trend has reversed. Again, wasn't really discrediting shady elite abuse shit as a whole. Just been doing research on urban legends and conspiracies in that area for years, and keep running into some stuff about my hometown that is not cogent with reality. There is plenty of interesting stuff without that, like the animal sacrifices in the caves in the foothills and the cocaine connection in the 70s and other stuff. But when a website goes off saying that everyone in the town is, in some fashion or another, a spook by night, schizo, please.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.